In a world of gods and monsters, the most dangerous player is a psychology professor named Schiller, who uses the hero's psyche as his personal chessboard. He began by deconstructing Bruce Wayne's carefully built facade, cornering Batman and Captain Gordon into a fragile alliance by weaponizing their mutual distrust. Schiller isn't just a mentor, he's a master manipulator running a city-wide therapy session where the couch is Gotham itself. He then turned his scalpel, like intellect, to Hell's Kitchen, exposing the raw nerve of Daredevil's past by revealing the mercy of his assassin ex-girlfriend, Elektra. Moments later, he was deflating Tony Stark's ego, diagnosing his relationship anxieties before expertly sixing him on a certain web-slinging rookie. That rookie, Peter Parker, was busy learning his own lesson, that great power means nothing in an underground fight club when pride gets you beaten unconscious. From Gotham to New York, Schiller is breaking down these nascent heroes, not to save them, but to reshape them in the crucible of their own trauma. When Peter opened his eyes, he found himself in a small, oppressive room, dimly lit and thick with the smell of rust and old leather. The only light came from a faint tungsten lamp in the corner, casting long shadows. A man in a red, form-fitting combat suit stood with his back to him, the soft clinking of metal accompanying his movements. Peter's body still ached in protest, but his nascent healing factor had already sealed the worst of his wounds. The man turned, his voice muffled by the mask, tinged with a coarse mockery. "You're lucky, kid. They only used a cocktail of laxatives and anesthetics. Anything stronger, and you'd be cooling on a slab right now." The spider's power was not a gift bestowed in full. Its growth required constant tempering. The spider, man of the future, would far surpass the Peter of today in strength, speed, and regeneration. But for now, he was just a high school student, newly powered and accustomed to tangling with street-level thugs. The ease with which he could overpower ordinary men had made him complacent, and he'd never had to consider his true limits. Consequently, his body had no tolerance for drugs. The owner of the underground boxing ring had taken him down easily. Peter pushed himself up. "I remember you. You saved me. You have a strong will to live," the man said, approaching with silent, predatory steps, "and you seem to possess certain talents, otherwise you'd be dead." A cold sweat prickled Peter's back. A kid raised in a wholesome, neighborly environment couldn't be expected to guard against the depravity of the human heart. Uncle Ben's lessons were of honor and integrity. The concept of true wickedness had never been part of his world. His voice trembled with residual fear. "I thought." He didn't finish, instead slamming a fist onto the bed, rage eclipsing his fear. "I'm going back there and teaching that owner a lesson, drugging me." "Did you really think a place like that came with an impartial referee?" Daredevil retorted, his tone sharp as a blade. He moved to the door, pausing to look back. "Your injuries aren't serious. Get out of here. Hell's Kitchen is no place for you." "I'm not a kid," Peter shot back. "I'm Spider-Man." "You have a long way to go." Daredevil's voice was flat. Before Peter could argue, a scarlet baton sliced through the air with a vicious hiss, stopping with pinpoint accuracy against his carotid artery. The cold metal froze him in place. His spider sense hadn't warned him, or rather, it hadn't had time to react. Cold sweat trickled from his temple. Daredevil's movement had been a blur, too fast for even his enhanced vision to track. What Matt Murdock had inherited from Stick was a martial art designed for killing, honed through 1,000 trials. Though mortal, every one of his physical attributes had been pushed to the apex of human potential. Combined with his supreme combat skills, he was, in that moment, leagues beyond the fledgling Spider-Man. Faced with such overwhelming power, the rookie hero could only swallow hard and force a stiff smile. "Man, that move was so cool. I think that's what you used when you saved me." He clumsily mimicked a few punches. Daredevil retracted his baton. "If you want to be this Spider-Man, you have a lot to learn. If you're interested, you can find me here." Daredevil was no saint. In this world, he was known for his decisive, often brutal methods. He had saved Peter partly from a sliver of sympathy. The boy's plight reminded him of his own father's death in the ring. More importantly, he was looking for a proc. A recent assassination attempt had left him injured, making him realize he couldn't be everywhere at once. An assistant would change everything. And this kid was a perfect fit. Powerful, gifted, and a complete blank slate. Raw, impulsive, and hopelessly naive. So, Peter began slipping into Hell's Kitchen every few days. He had come to the stark realization that he possessed immense strength, but was laughably inept in technique and worldly experience. Otherwise, why resort to an underground boxing ring for money? With his abilities, wealth should have been trivial to acquire. The desire for a better life, coupled with a young man's admiration for slick martial arts, allowed Peter to warm to Daredevil quickly, and he gradually came to understand the man's mission. Peter respected him, but also felt it was all so unnecessary. What could one man possibly do? The criminals in Hell's Kitchen grew like weeds. He could never eliminate them all. With that kind of dedication, he could have built a family, lived a happy life. But as the two grew closer, Peter's attitude shifted. This was especially true during the holidays, when he spent several nights at the hideout and witnessed Daredevil stitching up his own wounds time and time again. Daredevil was only human. He had no super healing, and his perception of pain was several times more acute than an ordinary person's. After every injury, suturing his wounds alone, Peter would watch him nearly black out, cold sweat pooling on the floor beneath him. Yet the next day, he would don the suit again and vanish into the sinful night. Hell's Kitchen was not as mad as Gotham, but injury was a constant for its vigilante. Sometimes it was a graze from a stray bullet during a gang war, other times a leap from a high rise to escape pursuit. Most often, it was the vast, gruesome bruises left by close quarters combat. Seeing this tapestry of old and new wounds, a complex emotion stirred within Peter. He had come to see Matt as a friend, and he didn't want his friend to get hurt. But what could he say? Tell him to stop seeking justice. Peter knew if this heart-rending pain couldn't stop Matt, his own words stood no chance. Then one night, Matt took a bullet to the calf while evading a ninja ambush. Peter helped him remove it, having never seen such a ghastly wound. The acrid smell of blood made his head spin, and he could see the stark white of bone beneath the peeled back flesh. His hands trembled. He was not yet a hero forged in blood and fire. No high school student would have fared better. As he clamped the bullet with tweezers under Matt's guidance, he squeezed a dry question from his throat. Why do you do this? Is it worth it? I thought you would have asked me sooner." Daredevil leaned against the wall, his voice trembling from the effort of suppressing the pain, yet holding a strange calm. "I can tell that while your family isn't well off, you have a loving guardian, a happy home. You've had a stable life. Maybe some trouble at school, but you were safe. You complain about being broke. But do you have any idea how lucky you are?" In the dim hovel, Daredevil's voice was a faint, fragmented murmur. "I was lucky, too. I was born in Hell's Kitchen, but my father wasn't a gambler or an addict. He did everything to protect me, to give me a chance to get out of this hellhole. He was a great father. To support me, he became a prize fighter. What happened to you? That was supposed to be his fate. The day I went to watch him fight, he refused to throw the match. The promoters had him killed. The dual shock, physical and psychological, made Peter unaware that tears were streaming down his face. Daredevil's consciousness began to fade from the pain, but he pressed on. You and I, we're the lucky ones. There are others, born to mothers who were junkies, born with addictions. To survive, they work for gangs, do things that are inhuman. Their lives are so miserable, they sink deeper into drugs, and their children just repeat the cycle. This is Hell's Kitchen. Yeah, I was lucky. I had the chance to leave, to get an education, to train. Since I'm luckier than them. Since I was given more, and have greater abilities. What reason do I have not to do this? Daredevil often called Hell's Kitchen this hellhole, and Peter had heard him curse its scum 1,000 times. But this was the first time he understood that Daredevil genuinely wanted to save it. He harbored a resolve so firm it bordered on obsession, to pull this place from the depths of hell. Peter couldn't imagine how anyone living in such an environment could even think of saving it. It was impossible. But Daredevil was doing it anyway. Peter remained silent. The moment he pulled the bullet free, Daredevil let out a strangled scream and passed out, his face a ghastly white. Peter stood in the middle of the room, looking at the dilapidated hideout. There wasn't a clean roll of bandages or a bottle of anesthetic to be found. Matt's wound could only be crudely wrapped with torn cloth. An unprecedented rage ignited in his chest, 1,000 times fiercer than any frustration he'd felt about being broke. This wasn't right. Matt was a good man, so determined, so resolute. Good men deserved good things. Why did those pot-bellied promoters live so comfortably? Why did the drunks who died in the gutters get a peaceful end? And why did a man like Daredevil have to endure such pain alone, collapsing in the silence of this dim, cramped room? His limited experience offered no answers. Violent emotions churned within him. He left the hideout and ran, wild through the midnight streets of Hell's Kitchen. Using his powers, he leaped between rooftops, soaring through New York's night sky. In the distance, the neon lights of casinos and nightclubs burned, a lurid spectacle. But the alleys below were plunged into a darkness like an eternal, sunless midnight. As he raced onward, his spider sense jabbed at his nerves. His chaotic thoughts, however, had slowed his reaction by a fraction of a second. A gold and red suit of armor charged him with thunderous force. A steel arm locked around his waist, carrying him hundreds of meters before tossing him onto a rooftop like a sack of garbage. Peter landed in a dizzying heap. The sleek armor hovered in midair, looking down. He staggered to his feet and tore off his mask as a clear, arrogant, and faintly amused voice emerged from the suit. That guy was right. You're just a pipsqueak who hasn't been weaned yet. I'm not a pipsqueak. Peter slammed a fist on the rooftop, roaring, I'm Spider-Man. A derisive snort came from the suit, Stark's voice dripping with contempt. Spider-Man, oh, you've made quite a name for yourself with the gamblers in Hell's Kitchen. The only good deed on your record is helping that scum win a pile of cash. Rage shot through him. This tin can attacks him, throws him, and then mocks him with the cruelest possible words. Peter roared and lunged, but the Iron Man suit simply carved an elegant arc through the air, effortlessly evading his clumsy attack. The Peter of this moment had no technique, no idea how to fight a high-tech marvel. Against the Mark V, guided by Jarvis' tactical calculus, he was helpless. Spider-Man yelled in frustration, "You damn robot. I'll show you." The armor landed softly, its metal feet making a dull thud. The voice was almost pitying. "Really? Show me how you beat up a few great prize fighters." Stark's venomous tongue struck a nerve. Peter's face flushed. Seemingly bored with the game, Stark's voice turned cold. "A kid who isn't weaned yet should go home. New York isn't your playground. Don't think a little extra spring in your step gives you the right to zip across the skyline. You've already gotten the wrong kind of attention." Stark had no fondness for this version of Peter. In his eyes, to possess such extraordinary gifts only to squander them for pocket money in an underground boxing ring was an act of supreme foolishness. Having survived his own trial by fire, the true Iron Man now awakened. He held nothing but contempt for the bumbling boy before him. Peter shot to his feet, slamming his mask onto the ground. He roared at the armor hovering in midair. "You call me out for running wild, but what about you? Aren't you doing the exact same thing?" A sliver of reason fought through his fury. He pointed at Stark, his voice thick with indignation. "That's right. You're in that expensive suit of armor. You've got all the money in the world to play this game. But what about me? My aunt and uncle are sick. They can't even afford a checkup. I need money, so why can't I fight in a ring? I haven't used this power to hurt anyone." Stark crossed his arms, the city's indifferent lights glinting off the cold metal. His voice, filtered through the suit's speakers, was devoid of warmth. "Have you ever considered that possessing this power and not using it to save others is, in itself, a form of harm?" A look of disbelief twisted Peter's face. He shook his head, as if he couldn't process the logic. "This is my power. I'll use it how I want. It's mine. Why shouldn't I use it to look out for myself instead of helping strangers for nothing?" At this moment, Peter had not yet felt the piercing grief of Ben Parker's death. He was incapable of understanding the profound weight behind the words, "With great power comes great responsibility." He was self-righteous, convinced it was only natural to use his power for his own benefit. His thinking wasn't wrong. Most people live for themselves. But Peter Parker's innate kindness and resilience destined him for a different path, qualities that, awakened by tragedy and experience, would forge him into a true hero. And Stark, for all his arrogance, possessed a deep, seated sense of noblesse oblige. As a super genius, he saw protecting ordinary people as his inherent duty. Stark sensed the raw, unstable emotion radiating from the kid and deduced he'd just suffered some kind of shock. He softened his tone. "I know there's a lot you don't understand. I was the same. But some things you have to experience for yourself. No one can preach them into you. I can only tell you this. If you continue down this path one day, you will regret it." With that, the thrusters on Stark's armor flared blue, and he vanished into the night. Peter was left alone, slumping onto the cold rooftop in defeat. He didn't understand why everyone seemed to be against him, as if he were some kind of villain. He couldn't figure out why, after gaining superpowers, his life had become even more painful than before. He'd earned money but didn't dare give it to his uncle. His late night excursions left him sleep-deprived, and his grades had plummeted. In his initial excitement, he had neglected Gwen, and now they were barely speaking. He wanted to beat his rival Thompson to a pulp, but feared the consequences and could only swallow his anger. This damned power had brought him no tangible benefits. It hadn't made him an overnight success or given him the comfortable life he craved. He didn't understand what had gone so wrong. The late night New York wind cut across his cheeks like a knife. Spider-Man sat on the edge of a building in Hell's Kitchen, his legs dangling over the abyss, lost in thought. Just then, his hearing caught a series of whispers from the alley below. It was the back door of a nightclub, guarded by two burly bouncers. From his vantage point, Peter could see them clearly, but they were oblivious to the shadow above. He saw a bald man in a jacket murmuring instructions to his subordinates. Peter's vision was sharp enough to make out the bullseye-shaped tattoo on the man's forehead. The bald man's cold voice drifted up. "We just have to floor it before he can react. You know Andre has a good car, it's modified, accelerates much faster than a standard vehicle. We stay put so he doesn't hear us. The moment he comes around that corner, we hit him. He's a dead man." One of his men replied, "I know. The intersection at the end of Mary Street is perfect. There's a pile of construction debris there. It'll cover the smell of gasoline." A cruel grin twisted the bald man's lips. "We take him out before that woman does. Then the boss, Kingpin, will understand who his most capable man really is." Peter listened distractedly. He understood they were planning a hit. But having just been lectured, he was filled with a rebellious spirit. What did this have to do with him? It was just a gang war. Why should he get involved? Besides, there were no good people in Hell's Kitchen anyway. With that thought, he turned and walked away. It was late, and he'd already told his uncle he wouldn't be home. He returned to Daredevil's dilapidated hovel. Daredevil was still sleeping, weakened by his injuries. Then again, Peter thought, maybe I was wrong. There was at least one good person in Hell's Kitchen, the friend right in front of him. Perhaps a little too good. He looked at the wound on Daredevil's calf, still seeping blood, then touched a bruise on his own body from where Iron Man had thrown him. It had already healed. A sense of absurdity washed over him. Daredevil was just an ordinary man. He didn't have a miraculous healing factor. That's why he was in such a miserable state, sticking his nose where it didn't belong. Peter wanted to learn his fighting skills, but he had no desire to emulate his life. If he had stormed down there in a fit of righteous fury, his knight would have been shot to hell. There were at least a dozen bodyguards in that club. He'd have to take them all down, and the bald guy probably had a granite chin. Against that many people, one unlucky punch would leave him aching for days. And for what? To stop one gang conflict. There were no innocents in Hell's Kitchen. Why should he risk injury to meddle in their affairs? With these thoughts, Peter lay down in a corner and drifted off. In his dream, he made a fortune and bought a mansion in Queens. Uncle Ben and Aunt May moved in. They hired a private doctor. Ben's illness was cured, and May looked a decade younger. Their family lived a life of wealth and happiness. The first half of the dream was beautiful, but perhaps his subconscious heard Daredevil's pained groans, because the second half took a sharp turn. While he was out, thugs broke into his mansion. They murdered his aunt and uncle and looted the house. The neighbors saw but didn't call the police. The police arrived but couldn't catch the culprits. Peter became a ghost, roaming the city day after day, trying to find the killer who had shattered his life, but found no clues. Finally, in his dream, Daredevil appeared. Peter rushed up to him, demanding to know why, after fighting so many criminals, he had let those specific thugs get away. Daredevil just looked at him coldly. "The only one responsible for this, I'm afraid, is you." Peter awoke with a jolt, drenched in cold sweat. Dawn was breaking. The cold air seeping through the window stung his lungs, and he felt an overwhelming urge to cry. Daredevil was awake. Peter helped him to a glass of water. Daredevil took the cup, his voice weak. "Thanks. I'll have to trouble you again in a bit. Could you go to the clinic at the end of Mary Street and get some medicine for me?" Although Matt said in a bit, Peter didn't set out until afternoon. The wound kept bleeding, forcing him to try several different bandages before he had it under control. By then, the sun was already low in the sky. Peter was ravenous. As he arrived at the clinic, the enchanting aroma of food filled his nostrils. Schiller heard the doorbell and emerged from the back. He saw a teenage boy in a hoodie standing at the door, sniffing the air so intently it was as if he were trying to inhale the meal itself. Schiller wiped his hands. "Come in." Peter scratched his head, embarrassed. "Afternoon, sir. A friend asked me to pick up some medicine. Said you'd know about it." Schiller nodded. "Ah, yes, but you'll have to wait until I've finished my meal. I trust he's not in immediate danger." "It's okay," Peter replied. "The bleeding stopped. He just needs painkillers." Schiller asked, "Have you eaten?" Peter's face flushed. He figured his gaze toward the kitchen had been a little too intense. Schiller smiled. "If not, stay and have a bite. You can take some back for Matt as well." The moment he finished speaking, a small yellow creature, balancing a bowl larger than its own body on its head, zipped to the dining table. It gave a very human-like sniff at the edge of the bowl and licked its lips, looking utterly impatient. Schiller had made Chinese food: glistening rice, tempting sweet and sour pork ribs, a refreshing dish of hot and sour shredded potatoes, and a steaming bowl of tomato and egg soup. Famished, Peter stared at the table, completely unable to utter a word of refusal. Ever since gaining his powers, Peter's appetite had grown considerably. After devouring an entire rice cooker's worth of rice, he was truly mortified. He put down his bowl, his ears burning. "I'm so sorry, doctor. I think I ate all your food. I'll pay for it." Schiller waved a hand. "No need. I was making another pot anyway for an old friend. There are still some ribs left. Serve them into that lunchbox in the cabinet and take them to Matt." Peter rushed to the kitchen. He cooked a fresh pot of rice and washed all the pots and pans with brisk efficiency until they sparkled. Watching him, Schiller thought that this version of Spider-Man was quite likable. In contrast, Pikachu, its belly round and full, sprawled out on a chair, feet in the air, and started snoring. Schiller grabbed its lightning bolt-shaped tail. "Don't think you can shirk your duties just because someone else is doing the dishes. Go take out the trash." Peter quickly interjected, "Oh, sir, I can get that. I'll take it out on my way." Schiller nodded. "All right, thank you. There's no garbage disposal fee here. Just walk straight ahead. You can throw it on the pile of debris at the corner." Peter carried the 2 large bags of scraps out the clinic's back door and immediately saw the spot Schiller had mentioned. It was some distance away, a mountain of broken bricks, waste wood, and other trash, emitting a pungent odor. Beside the heap, several beggars were hoping to find a meal. When Peter walked over, the beggars were on the other side of the pile, out of his sight. Perhaps it was because he was full, or because Schiller's food had been so satisfying, but the gloom in Peter's heart had vanished. He happily swung the 2 bags, took a short running start, and whipped his arm forward. The bags sailed through the air in a perfect arc, landing squarely on top of the pile. "Bingo!" Peter shouted. He and Uncle Ben used to love playing that game, standing far away and trying to sling the bags perfectly into the bin. Back then, he didn't have the strength, and it was always Ben who would laugh and clean up his misses. Peter made a mental note to show his uncle his new arm strength. When the bags landed, one of them split open. Leftover ribs, scraps of meat, uneaten shredded potatoes, and a sprouted potato tumbled out. The beggars, as if seeing the most exquisite delicacy, scrambled to grab the food. The debris pile was a small mountain, and to climb it, they had to step on loose bricks and planks. Only then did Peter realize people were picking through the garbage. Feeling embarrassed, He took a leap and landed halfway up the pile, intending to retrieve the trash. The beggars were weak from hunger. An elderly woman, closest to the top, grabbed a piece of debris that broke off with a crack. Losing her handhold, she cried out and fell backward. Spider-Man had just reached the top when he saw her fall. He instinctively reached out, but he was a split second too late. The pile contained everything imaginable: shards from liquor bottles, rusted rebar, wooden planks with nails sticking straight up. Hitting any of it could be fatal. Fortunately, Peter possessed extraordinary abilities. He ducked in a flash, his body extending at an impossible angle, and precisely caught the falling woman. Before he could feel proud of his reaction speed, the violent roar of an engine exploded through the air, followed by the piercing screech of brakes and the sickening, dull thud of a heist. Beat, impact, thump. Blood bloomed in the air like a sinister crimson lotus. Peter's head snapped around, his eyes wide as he stared at the intersection. The figure that had been sent flying was horrifically familiar. It was Daredevil. A massive pool of blood gushed from where he landed. The thick, pungent smell cast a hazy, blood-red filter over Peter's entire world. He scrambled down the pile like a madman. Matt lay in a pool of his own blood, which seeped from his eyes, nose, and mouth. His spine was twisted into a grotesque shape. He wasn't dead, not yet, but with the nerves connecting to his brain severed, he was paralyzed. Peter's body trembled violently. He scooped Matt into his arms and burst through the back door of Schiller's clinic, his voice a hoarse scream. "Doctor, doctor, someone needs help." The moment Schiller saw Matt's horrific state, he knew his enemies had ambushed him. His voice was cold and calm. "The garage is next door. Put him in the car. We're going to Presbyterian Hospital now." With injuries this severe, only the best hospital in New York had any chance of saving him. Schiller tore through Manhattan, getting Matt to Presbyterian in record time. He had some sway there, and Matt was rushed into an operating room almost immediately. But it wasn't long before the attending physician came out, his face grave. "The chances of this gentleman pulling through are slim," he told them. "Unfortunately, he's in no condition to give a testament. If you are his family, you may want to see him one last time." Peter's defenses shattered. The events of the day linked together in his mind to form a fatal chain. He finally understood. The man the gangsters had been planning to murder was the only good person in Hell's Kitchen, Matt Murdock. What he couldn't accept was that he had caused this. If he had just dealt with those gangsters, no, if he had even told Matt about them, he would have been more careful. If he hadn't stayed at the clinic to eat, Matt wouldn't have come out looking for him. If he hadn't been playing around, hadn't thrown those 2 damned garbage bags, he might have had time to tackle Matt out of the way. He had so many chances to save his friend, and he had done nothing. Daredevil was going to die. Peter couldn't accept it. Schiller, by contrast, was unnervingly calm. He looked the physician in the eye. "What is the primary issue?" "Cardiopulmonary function, the brain." The doctor shook his head. "His spine. The damage is too severe. The nerves are likely beyond repair. Even if we save his life, he'll never move again." Schiller took a deep breath, his voice laced with unshakable resolve. "How do we save him?" The doctor hesitated. "Perhaps, Doctor, Strange might have a way. He's the best neurosurgeon we have. He might be the only one who could possibly reconnect that many severed nerves." Schiller turned instantly, giving Peter an order. "Peter, I'm going to find the man who can save Matt. You must stay here. The people who want him dead won't give up. After I leave, ensure no one enters that operating room. I will be back as fast as I can." Without another word, he strode away. Peter stood frozen, trembling, muttering to himself, "No one gets in. No one gets into the operating room. I won't let anyone in." After leaving the hospital, Schiller immediately dialed Pepper's number. He was concise. "I need the home address of a doctor named Strange." A moment later, an address appeared on his phone. It was for a high-end apartment building not far from the hospital. Schiller activated his powers. He didn't take the elevator, nor did he intend to knock. After a series of phase shifts through solid walls, he appeared like a phantom behind Stephen Strange, who was enjoying his afternoon tea. Strange heard a faint noise. He turned his head, and the black tip of a cane was already resting silently against his throat. Schiller's voice was sharp, devoid of emotion. "Listen closely. A friend of mine is critically injured at Presbyterian. You are the best neurosurgeon there. You will gather your things and perform the surgery." An incredulous expression appeared on Strange's face. Schiller's hand released the cane, but it remained suspended in midair, its tip aimed squarely at Strange's throat. Strange raised his hands and backed away, but the cane followed him like a shadow. Schiller raised a hand, and Strange's coat flew from a rack across the room. Strange's eyes widened at the supernatural event. Schiller threw the coat at him, his tone leaving no room for argument. "I think you understand that you have no right to refuse. Now, come with me."